Another thing that comes up that it's good to be aware of when dealing with frequencies and waveforms and cycles per second is the concept of phase. Phase is the relative delay or offset between two sound waves of the same frequency. When there's no offset, the waves are considered coincident and they're in phase. But when there is an offset, they're considered out of phase. So let's take a look. We have a coincident pair of two sine waves, and what you get when you combine those two sine waves is you get more of the same. It just increases the amplitude. If they're in different phases of the cycle when they're summed, the amplitude of the resulting wave will look something like this, and we'll get different increases and decreases in the amplitude based on the offset. And if they're at complete opposite stages in the phase, you get what we call phase cancellation, meaning that this side of the phase gets canceled out by the energy of this side of the phase, and the result is cancellation, or nothing. Needless to say, this phase cancellation can become a problem when you're working with digital audio, and you'll find that it'll creep up in a few different situations, such as dealing with microphone placement and making sure you have properly wired cables. We'll talk about this a little bit in other sections, but I just want you to be aware of the concept of phase and the idea that it's the correlation between two sets of sounds or two sets of waves and where they are when we hear them, and at what stage of a cycle they're in when we hear both of them, or when they both arrive at the same point, like when two sounds get to a microphone. We want to know what stage of the cycle they're in, and hopefully they're in phase. So when we have two waves that are in phase, we get more of the same. We get greater amplitude, but we get the same frequency and we get the same intensity. When we have sounds that are slightly out of phase or offset, we get kind of a wavering effect, or it sounds like the sound will kind of be bright for a moment and then dull for a moment. There's actually an effect called an aphaser where we use this to our advantage to kind of add some texture to sounds. But if you're not looking for that texture, like you're trying to record a grand piano and you don't want it to have a phaser effect on it, you need to pay attention to this. You'll usually be able to identify phasing when you hear it because it doesn't sound quite right unless you're intending for it to happen. And finally, if we have two waves that are completely out of phase, we end up with phase cancellation. You can see that if the waves are at exactly opposite points in the cycle, the result is cancellation because the amplitudes cancel each other out, and so we don't hear anything at all. And this can be a problem when you're trying to record something because you want to hear it.